Welcome back to Rolando Estacado. My name is Rolando, and for today's episode, we're going to be covering the other Tomahawk design that was sent to me by designer Ray Torona, and it was put together, and it was made in the forge of Damon's Alpha knife. And that second design happens to be the Yokai Tomahawk. The Yokai Tomahawk, I gotta tell you, the first time I handled this, and as you saw in the unboxing, all I kept saying was, wow, wow, wow. The only words that came out of my mouth. I'm going to cover the reasons why I was saying wow. Firstly, I do want to say that what this is made of, this is, if I'm not mistaken, the same type of steel that was used by Daniel Winkler in the making of the Winkler R&D. What we are looking at here is the Yokai Tomahawk, and Yokai comes from the Japanese culture. Turns out that Ray's wife happens to be Japanese, so he thought, as an homage to the cultural background of his wife, that he would design a tomahawk in honor of her cultural background. But also for my own personal development, I'm a Filipino martial artist, but as you can see in the background, I have a very great interest and passion in Japanese martial arts, specifically the Japanese sword arts. So when he sent me the Yokai Tomahawk, there were so many things that stood out to me that I'm going to take a bit of time breaking this down in terms of how I plan to move with it, and a lot of which is informed by his design. And again, Ray has an extensive background in the military and law enforcement, but also as an instructor to military personnel. And he has a substantial background in Cabales Serrada, which is a Filipino martial art, training directly under the tutelage of Vincent Cabales. But he is also a practitioner and trains under Mal Morny in Silat, which has a Tomahawk curriculum. So let's get into it with this specific design. So it's very clear that, once again, it pays respectful homage to the Winkler R&D Sayok Tomahawk. That's very clear just by taking a look at it. Now, the things that I like about it are some of the deviations from the design. And let's start with the handle. Firstly, you can see the texturing along this so that it gives that good tactile feedback to the practitioner. There's something I want you to notice. The texturing along the handle are actually subtle finger grooves, so that when my fingers wrap around the handle, it feels like my fingers are supposed to go there because they're actual finger grooves. So there are finger grooves here, and then finger grooves here. This is the most comfortable tomahawk handle I've ever handled. Now, one thing that I will give as a note to Ray, if you can put this kind of handle onto your multo tomahawk, you got a winner. You already have a winner, but this is going to be a winner plus with your multo tomahawk because the handle design here is absolutely exquisite. So this is what I want everyone here to pay attention to. So number one, you have the three sectioning, largo mano, medium range, and then short range for the pistol grip. That's very clear. But then now you're looking at 1, 2, 3, 4 extensions of the handle that work as indexing reference points for your grip. So number one, when I'm in this gripping position, if I happen to be in a very bad position, but also I want to have a little bit more of that range, I can actually hook this part of the grip. Maybe even this part, because I have this piece of purchase. But it also works, watch this, upward puño, and then downward puño. This is a really great innovation on the handle because this is far more weaponized than any tomahawk handle that I've ever seen because this has downward and upward puño capabilities. Then we have this indexing over here. So once again, it moves very quickly because it allows me to use this part of my anatomy, which lends very well to Filipino stick methodologies. Then when I move up into the midsection of the grip and I can do more close quarters range, I can also hook here. So I can also have this kind of twirling action. Then I have the pistol grip. But there is something else about this grip that when I first handled it, I instinctively went to it and made me realize what methodology I'm going to use when I move with the Yokai. Because the Yokai also handles very well when I grab it the other way. The first indication that I could handle it this way was because of how aggressive this back spike is. And again, I'm not the biggest fan of reverse spikes, but this is kind of convincing me that at least for this tool, it works. If I can hold it in this fashion and hold it this way and move with it this way, right? At first, someone may think, well, why would you want to do it this way? One, because of the balance. Number two, the handle ergonomics of it actually lends to it. But because it's really comfortable in this movement, it started to make me think that the methodology for this is not Serrada, is not even Filipino martial arts. It's something that's a bit of a close cousin to it. I think this is going to move very well like the Japanese kama, so the Japanese sickle. So I think the way this is going to move is going to be a lot like a sickle, where at times in Japanese methodology, they turn this around and they don't have a back spike on the kama. There's a bit of a block, then a switch, and then there's a cut. Now there's a reason why this cut is going to be very important. It has a lot to do with the design of the top head. So we have an aggressive back spike. We have a section over here, so for some sort of friction control when you land on a target. But there is not only an edge at the bottom, there's also an edge at the top. That's going to be very cool, and in my opinion, lends well more to the Japanese sickle kama methodology, because if I'm going to hold the yokai this way, and I'm using the back spike more as a front spike, when it turns over, I have this opportunity to cut with that upward edge and then flip it over so that now I can cut and control with that bottom edge. This is going to be a little different and going to be a little exciting, because the kama methodology in Japanese martial arts is going to be a little similar to Filipino martial arts in some of their strategies and some of their movements. The cool thing about the kama methodology is that, from what I understand, samurai who weren't necessarily the most well-heeled were at some point selling their samurai swords just to make ends meet, and they had to learn how to use the kama as part of their overall fighting methodology. So what does that mean for us? That means, although some of the movement is going to come from Filipino martial arts, the trunk biomechanics in terms of centering the hara, the stabling of the hara, is going to come from Japanese martial arts, from kenjutsu. So that's going to be interesting, because you're not just going to see twirling, 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 twirling. At some point there's going to be a grounding, punching, and then a control that comes from the trunk body dynamics of the Japanese samurai. Another interesting nod to Japanese martial culture is that the front portion of the yokai, tomahawk, is in fact inspired by the kunai. Now the kunai, from what I understand, was a type of edge tool, a little similar to a knife, but it had all types of uses when it came to martial use, because the way I understand it is that the handle had a loop at the bottom, and there were a lot of things you could do with that loop. You know, from what I understand, I think the kunai at some point was used as a throwing knife, some sort of grappling hook, because you could attach a rope to it. So there were a lot of things that you could do. So in many ways, this is a somewhat of an all-purpose kind of design, and I think that this yokai design has a lot of features and benefits that have yet to really be explored. I would like, and at some point I think it's worth exploring, the multi-purpose design of the kunai has to be explored and, in my opinion, peer reviewed by other YouTubers who can take a look at it from a multi-purpose context. And again, that is outside of the scope of my channel. I don't do multi-purpose. I don't do any breaching. I don't go through concrete with any of the tools. I don't dig with it, simply because my channel is about the health benefits of martial movements pertaining to the use of our traditional martial weapons. So I will encourage several YouTubers to kind of take a look at it and also view it from a more utilitarian standpoint, but also to take a look at the other functions of a tomahawk that has been used by our military, meaning breaching. So breaching, going through concrete, testing it on more hard surfaces. So it's something that I encourage my other YouTube colleagues to take a look at, because it's just outside of the scope of my channel. Can't wait to share with you how I like to move with the Yokai Tomahawk. Thank you for letting me share, and I hope you enjoyed this video.
The Japanese word yokai is an all-encompassing term that covers spirits, demons, ghosts, and even monsters. Here you see me holding the yokai tomahawk, where I am using that tomahawk head as if it is a tsuba, which is a sword guard from Japanese katana. So what it does is that by holding it forward, it not only covers my hand, but it starts to square up my shoulders so that I can now start to use the body mechanics of Japanese swordsmanship. By holding the handle in this manner, I'm really using it to center my core, activate it, and also activate my lats. Although this Chudan position has tactical value, it is really, as far as martial movement, a way to activate my core and my lats. So what I will be doing here, by activating my body in a way that is similar to Kenjutsu, what that really does is helps me position myself in a way to really take advantage of the yokai design, while making sure that I can activate its features and benefits, just like that top edge, which can back cut, but allowing some of that fluidity that is also found in Filipino martial arts. You're going to see some very versatile slashing and cutting capabilities, but also some control and even some body armor piercing capabilities. So what you'll see here is that initial back cut, and then it will flow into another back cut. So that doesn't come from Japanese swordsmanship. Notice that I can go ahead and make this different type of grip and then switch it again into that back cut once again. You see that there's a long range capability with the back cut, which is using that top edge of the kunai. When that momentum starts, it actually spins in my hand and reverses into that reverse spike. But what is important for us to look at is, as fluid as this is, it's important to use the kama methodology, where the samurai start to root and sink into their stances. This may look like an attack body draw, but it actually sinks and roots my torso. So what that does is, when I attack from long range, I lead with my shoulder, and now when I hook, I'm not just hooking with the tool or with my arms. I am rooting into my core and into my hara, so now one unit is hanging off of his neck. So it's an important aspect of the tool, because once I enter through a hook or any sort of body armor penetration movements, it's important to use the kama methodology, where the samurai were using it as if it was a sword. So you're going to see some of this largo mano movement that you're going to see in Filipino martial arts. But remember, it has that reverse spike, it has the bottom edge, it has that front spike, but also has that top edge. So it's like a tomahawk, like a buoy, like a samurai sword. It has that punyo at the bottom, which is multifaceted, similar to the sayok karambit. And also, when you see the sectioning at the bottom, you can also start to see that it can move like a stick. So it's very, very well thought out and very multifaceted. Pay close attention to how I move with the yokai. At times it can seem very light, but then at times it can seem very heavy. At times it behaves a bit like a ghost, and at times it behaves terrifyingly like a monster. It really lives up to its yokai moniker. On the one hand, it can be light and heavy, kind of like a ghost and a demon. So you see some of these light movements, and then it's sunk into that torso. But then that top edge allows it so that you can do light movements like a back cut reverso, but it is supported by a type of sunk samurai type of body that comes from Kenjutsu. So you'll see some of the light movements over here, long range jabbing. The kunai shape allows it to penetrate and extract very quickly, which I really like. And then you'll see some of the same thing with this mid-range jabbing, and I think that makes it very versatile. Now when we take a look at it with a flow, that flow allows it so that once I'm inside, I can go ahead and make those grip transitions from reverso to front spike so that it can sync. And that's what makes it very versatile, and sometimes it can be very challenging because you don't know what the Tomahawk is fully capable of. It's so brand new. In fact, I think it's only been out for a year. So I think its full capabilities and in fact the possibility of its own separate curriculum can very well be on the table. Because if you take a look at some of these movements, how it flows from the outside, that is relatively typical of a Tomahawk. But for it to work outside and then do a reverse spike so that it can be very confusing for the adversary, and then it goes into another grip transition, that's very unique for a Tomahawk. You don't necessarily see that. And then when you now come into the closer ranges, in even working with that reverse spike, that changes a lot of things too, because now the handle can be weaponized in a way that's very different. So you can see these hooking and catching capabilities, the jabbing capabilities, body armor sinking capabilities. You can start to see these things kind of blend together, but in a way that's very seamless and you don't normally see in a Tomahawk. So we're going to take a look at some of the close quarters capabilities of this. You see that puño, which allows me to sink into that body armor. Look what it does to the limb. It can actually rip right up because of that top edge, but from this angle the handle can be weaponized, so now it can act like an impact tool and actually break the limb with that pressure down. I can then grip transition into a wrist lock and then use my body as a lever to control the entire body of the adversary. Look at its close quarter capabilities, look at the punch grip and how versatile it can be, and look, it even acts like a tonfa. So I can choke up on the pistol grip and then close the gap by using it as a tonfa, and once I'm inside, I can then use the kunai edge to cut right across with that top edge. I think the Yokai is so multifaceted that in many ways I think it requires its own curriculum, because it demands a lot of the practitioner in order for them to be able to really access the full feature benefits of the Yokai. Because even at close quarters with the hooking here, the grip is such so that it flows really fluidly into arm breaks and arm controls, but that top edge really just changes everything. Because once you have that top edge, it doesn't necessarily get caught or get stuck. It can just basically slice right on through. So I think what's important here is that as you observe the movements and how capable it is, take a look at all the things that's happening when I slow the movement down, because you just can't catch it when it is moving at full speed. It has nothing to do with my own speed, but just all the subtle nuances of the tool and what it can do once it can really show its potential. I really hope you enjoyed this video, and I really enjoyed moving with the Yokai. Stick around, stay tuned, more videos to come.